Hi, boys and girls. Tonight's video is on multi-step word problems. Remember to start with the date and a title at the top of your notes. Write down 2 important tips and at least 2 examples from the video. Okay, let's get started. Remember, when solving a word problem, we're like detectives solving a mystery. First, we must determine what the question is asking and then look at the evidence in the problem one step at a time. It's a really good idea to underline important information that you will need to solve the problem. There is usually more than one thing that has to be done to solve that problem, so keep that in mind. So let's look at a problem together, remembering these steps. So we want to remember to think about the question. What is it asking me to do? Decide what information is important in the problem and underline that important information you're going to need to solve the problem. And then decide what steps and operations will be needed to answer the question. And only one will is necessary. Okay, so let's read the problem. The Ruddy family took many road trips throughout the year all over the United States. They traveled a total of 23,425 miles. Mrs. Ruddy drove 3,225 miles, and Caitlin drove 5,647 miles. Lucky Mr. Ruddy drove the rest of those miles. How many miles did Mr. Ruddy drive? So remember, first we want to really focus on the question. We want to know how many miles Mr. Ruddy drove. So now we need to go back into the problem and decide on the important information we're going to need to solve this problem. So we know that they traveled a total of 23,425 miles. So we know that we know that Mrs. Ruddy drove 3,225 miles and Caitlin drove 5,647 miles. And what we're trying to figure out is what the difference in these miles are from the total. So the first thing we would have to do is add up Mrs. Ruddy's miles and Caitlin's miles. So let's go ahead and do that. 5 and 7 is 12. 4, 5, 6, 7. 6 plus 2 is 8. And 5 plus 3 is 8. So together they traveled 8,872 miles. So if we were trying to determine the difference of that and the total, we would subtract to find the difference. So 23,425 minus 5,647. Why don't you pause the video here and see what answer you get? Okay, so how did you do? This is the answer that I got. Hopefully you had that same answer. So the difference between the total, which was 23,425, and the total that Caitlin and Mrs. Ruddy drove, 8,872, was 17,778. Poor Mr. Ruddy, he had to drive a lot of miles. Let's look at another problem. So here, let's remember, read the problem and think about the question. Underline important information to help you solve it. And then decide what steps and operations are necessary to solve it. So here's the story. This one's a little more challenging. Caitlin, and for those of you who don't know, Caitlin's my daughter. Caitlin opened up a new bank account when she moved to Rochester, New York. She deposited a sum, or a total, of $13,285 into her account. After graduation, she deposited the money she received from graduation gifts into that account. Then she withdrew $75 to pay for groceries that week. After that, she had $15,125 in her account. What we want to know, boys and girls, is how much money did she get from graduation gifts? Okay, because we said after graduation, she deposited the money she received from graduation into her account. But we don't know how much she deposited. We're trying to figure out how much she deposited. So let's be detectives and let's see if we can use the information in the word problem to figure out how much she deposited. So I know that she started with $13,285. She ended with $15,125. Is that amount smaller or is it larger? And if you notice, the amount is larger. So she had to add some money into that account. So we're figuring out the difference between $15,125 and $13,285. And that's going to give us part of the information. We'll know how much more money was added. So let's go ahead and add those two amounts together. I'm sorry, we're not adding these two amounts together. We're subtracting these two amounts to determine how much money was added. Okay, so I'm sorry if I confused you. We're starting with the larger number, and we're going to subtract the smaller number to determine the difference. Okay, so 5 take away 5 is 0. 2 take away 8, we can't do that, so we're going to borrow here. 12 take away 8 is 4. 0 take away 2, we can't do it. 10 take away 2 is 8. 4 take away 3 is 1. So it appears that there's a difference of 1,840. So some of you might be thinking, well, that's how much money she got for graduation gifts. But there's one fact over here that we need to remember. She took away $75 for her groceries. So what we need to do is add that $75 back to this amount to figure out how much money she had altogether before she deducted that 75. So we have 5, and we have 11, we have 9, and we have 1. So for her graduation, boy, what a lucky girl, she received a total of $1,915. All right? So first we had to determine the amount, the difference between the amount she started with and the amount she ended with. And then we had to add back in that $75 that she had taken out. And that gave us the total amount that she received for her gift. Maybe I'll go back to college. Maybe I can get some money. Okay, now it's your turn to try one. So I'll read it with you, but then you're going to solve it in your notes tonight and be ready to share your answer with the class tomorrow. So be sure to show your work. There are many cities in the state of Florida. The 3 most populated states are Miami, Tampa, and Orlando. Miami's population is 399,457 people. Tampa's is 335,709 people, and Orlando has 238,300 people. How many people reside in these 3 cities? So I want to see tomorrow, what would you underline in the story? What is the question that they're asking? And what operation are you going to use to find that answer? And remember, be sure to show your work. Okay, good luck, and I'll see you tomorrow.